Hi, my name's Dee and welcome to Sunchild Tarot. Now, I'm not doing a reading this time. I want to talk about the qualities of testing your own intuition and the intuition of the readers that you listen to. This is all inspired by an encounter that I had with another YouTube reader who is one that I do follow, and she started one of her recent videos discussing about how she'd moved out of a big city. Fine, fair enough. And then to get away from all the 5G, and was pushing the 5G conspiracy theory, where it's 5G is breaking down our immune systems, 5G is doing this, that, and the other, and let's not mention the big virus at the moment, which is the same conspiracy theory that they had about 4G and about 3G, which has pretty much proved to be ridiculous. Now, I know I'm sat here on YouTube doing tarot readings, but I have a basis in science. I went and did astronomy at university, for example. So I'm a big believer in testing whatever information comes through. Now, people in the spiritual community talk about the battle between love and fear, but you can consider that the opposite of love is actually indifference, not fear. Fear is a completely separate energy, which sometimes is useful and most of the times isn't. Now, promoting the 5G conspiracy theory, especially when you have an audience of nearly 25,000 people, I see as incredibly irresponsible. It is hardly combating fear, it is generating fear in the world. Now, if someone is living consciously, they have to look at the results of their actions. I like to try and look at the results of my actions. I'm only human, so sometimes that's in retrospect rather than in advance, but that's a mistake that we can all make. But going that the 5G masks are going to kill us, when in America, in Britain, in Australia, 5G towers have been burnt down or knocked over or destroyed by people convinced that 5G is going to kill them all, which all that does is hamper the emergency services. It hampers, well, data transfer in an area of whatever way you want to look at it. But what really got my goat is I put this point forward saying that this person had a responsibility on what they were doing to promote love or promote fear to their audience of nearly 25,000 people. And I got the response, "I'm a psychic who channels messages. My work requires no logical proof." I cannot disagree with that more. The whole point, with the point I was making about science at the start, is when you start using your intuition, when you start receiving messages from whatever source they come from, your intuition, spirit, guidance, God, however you want to look at it, you have to test it. When you go to a new reader, you have to test them. That is why I put a past and a present in my reading. It is a scale for my reading to be tested. Is it relevant? Is it applying to me? Meaning you. These things need to be tested. If we are living consciously, if we are consciously and unconsciously creating our own reality down here on planet Earth, we chose to incarnate in a physical experience. We chose to incarnate in a world that we have agreed to the rules that world will operate by prior to coming here. Those rules can be typified by science. Yes, manifestation is one thing, but manifestation does not alter the fact that a brick is a brick and fire will burn. Unless you've done firewalks and stuff. So, but, you know, as a general rule, the laws of physics hold fast. The laws that the physical world has to abide by, or does abide by, hold fast. And when you have a platform to many thousands of people, you don't need, the next comment that this reader responded to me is, I don't need to justify anything else to you, which is the whole point of my video. Yeah, she doesn't need to justify anything that is her truth. She does need to justify sharing that in front of thousands and thousands of people when there are people who can take that information and use it to fuel their own delusions and their own the voice of spirit is one thing, but there are many voices in our heads. There are voices from the TV. There are voices from our parents. There are voices from all areas of society. And all of that notwithstanding, there is still the issue of mental health. There are people who hear voices that are purely generated out of their own mind. That's, if I've got my diagnosis right, called schizophrenia. And those people struggle with those voices. There are people who suffer from delusions. There are people who have persecution complexes. There are people who have that sense of persecution even more ingrained in them in the form of some form of disorder or another. And the whole concept of freedom of speech is you're free to say what you want, and you are free to endure the consequences of whatever it is that you have said. You need to test the information that comes through to you. I responded to this this lady by basically saying, I'm asking you to look at your participation in the battle between love and fear, and you seem to be working for the fear side by pushing the 5G nonsense, which has resulted in towers being burned down in both your country and mine, and hers is from at greater risk of fire. Maybe she should check just the source of what she is channeling and the filters that she is channeling it through. Everybody's work deserves to be tested. Everybody's. When I went through spiritualist medium training in the Ethical Spiritualist Church, they talk about bringing through proof. Proof is something that can be tested. You know, okay, you might be bringing through Auntie Edna, but it's no good if the person that you are talking to doesn't have an Auntie Edna. But if you can bring through Auntie Edna that always wore a black stole and had a nice little golden crucifix rather than a silver one, for example, and had a certain type of bangle and used to act like this and do like that, and then the other person can go, yes, I know exactly who you're talking about. That's where a test has been passed. That is that element of proof. So we all have our own filters that we work through. You know that I don't particularly enjoy doing love readings because it's not that I don't enjoy doing them. It's, well, I don't, but that's not how I see the information that comes through the cards. If you've watched any of my readings, you know it's far more centered on a person's motivations, sense of identity, sense of wholeness, their emotions. That's their emotions, the querent's emotions, not the emotions of in terms of relating to another person in an intimate relationship. My own opinion is that's none of my business, and I'm not going to look at that, because everybody has the right to run their own relationships the way that they see fit. And you can only run your relationships well if you have a greater understanding of yourself, and that's what I'm hoping my cards put forward. But always, always, always test your intuition. Test the guidance that you receive. If you receive some information, you go, that doesn't make sense. Examine it. If you if you receive some information, go, oh, that makes sense. Just make sure it's not just the equivalent of your mind generating something like a Google search engine, which is the epitome of living in your own echo chamber. Google will always show you the results that Google thinks you want to see, which means it can be very easy to descend, when you think you're doing research, to descend into your own echo chamber. But in this age of fake news, in this age of wild and rampant conspiracy theories, you have to examine anything and everything. You have to apply some form of critical thinking to it. I don't take everything in the spiritual world as in community on face value, and neither should you. When a ritual magician is working, they will do a ritual to, unless it's to a specific goal. Many of the rituals are far more transcendental than that. When you're working through initiations, it's almost an element of what happens if I do this? Or to put it more facilely, what does this button do? And the only way to find out what that button does is by pressing it. You have to keep testing and examining things. I think I've made my point. Please do comment down below if you have a point one way or another. But wherever you receive your guidance, if you receive your guidance personally from spirit, if you receive your guidance from friends, if you receive your guidance from tarot readers on YouTube like me, test it always. Test it and measure, hold it up against the world that you are experiencing and go, does this fit? Does this explain things in a way I do understand, or does it explain things in a way that I haven't previously understood and is valid, or is it just not at all valid? Please test it. Cheers.